From the 1011 Now streaming studio in Lincoln, Nebraska, this is the REPORT Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dog's Convenience Store.
Good evening, everyone. Meteorologist Jessica Blum here in the 1011 streaming studio alongside Chase Matson. Is that how you say your last name? I forgot to ask.
Yeah, Madison. That's good.
Madison, my
You're
bad.
new here. It's all
Yeah,
right.
it is. I am new here, as he pointed out. It's my first REPORT Husker Show with you guys, and it's a late edition of that. The time is just after 12:20 in 12:20 midnight, really, being here on November 9th now, after the Huskers hold off a little life in UCLA late in the game to pull off a win 28-21. I'll actually bring up that game score graphic here for us to talk about it a little bit. Chase, 28-21, Nebraska on top, a road game in Pasadena, the Rose Bowl. They were starting out comfortably with a kickoff temperature of 70 degrees. We were half that here at Lincoln with a wind chill in the middle 20s. So quite the difference between locations, just for fun. But UCLA now coming off two losses, really, with Indiana losing 56-6 last week, and now we've got this loss to Nebraska, 28-21. Big games for Emmett and TJ Lateef, and of course in TJ Lateef's true freshman start here tonight. Can you just speak a little bit to what you saw out of him?
Yeah, the Compton, California kid put on a show, and I think he did what he needed to do. He was only 13 of 15. They didn't give him a ton of chances to throw. Rule talked about afterwards. They called more throws, and he checked into runs at times. This really was the Emmett Johnson Bowl. I believe he had 29 carries last week. He gets 28 this week, goes for 129. But the crazy thing is that he was 129 on the ground, 103 receiving. They used him in the pass game. They had a throwback screen that Rocco Spindler and Justin Evans were like madmen running down the left sidelines that led to a big touchdown for Emmett. And he caught a second one on an open play as well. So really good concepts for a freshman quarterback to be running. And if you're a Husker fan, this was a breath of fresh air after what was a tumultuous third quarter and turned into a nightmare injury for Dylan Raiola last week against USC. And UCLA, it's two straight losses for them, but they were coming off of a bye week and a blowout to Indiana. But this is a UCLA team that definitely has proven to be resilient in the Big Ten since they cleared house and fired their head coach and brought in Jerry Neuheisel, I believe I'm saying it. The young offensive coordinator, promoting him. They've had some big games. They knocked off Penn State. They've won here and there where it wasn't just going to be a walk in the park for Nebraska, a team that's under an interim coach and a young offensive coordinator. UCLA put up a good fight, and to be honest, it really came down to some strategic offense down the stretch and some bad UCLA penalties that kept Nebraska on the field at times, but they definitely put up a great fight. This was a 28-7 game at one point, and then it came down to Nebraska needing to pick up a first down to run out the clock in a one-possession game. So by no means it was a walk in the park, but if you look at the stat sheet, what Emmett Johnson did and what TJ Lateef did were really productive, and Nebraska is now 7-3.
Yeah, and like you said, really, it was, if you are a Nebraska fan, this was an exciting game to watch, especially just going back to the first drive and seeing TJ Lateef for the first time. He is one of 5 true freshman quarterbacks to start for Nebraska, that being Tommy Frazier, Cody Green, Adrian Martinez, Dylan Raiola, and now TJ Lateef. But that first drive was very impressive. To me, he showed a lot of awareness in the pocket. He, as Matt Rule said in his press conference, was a triple threat, not only with his arm, his legs, but also his brain, just being smart, playing in the pocket, and really delivering on a lot of and going perfect for deep into the game until the fourth quarter, I think it was.
Yeah, and just to your point, just 2 incomplete passes, I believe.
Yeah.
Not a ton through the air. He had a few decent across the field passes. He had one zipped. It felt like, I don't know if it was smoke or a fog that kind of came over or marine layer that came over the Rose Bowl. You'd probably know better than I would. But it got a little bit like misty in the air, kind of at least from the TV perspective, watching it from a bird's eye view. And he had a few great throws on that drive, one to Dane Key across the middle. But overall, I think what was successful here is Dane Key had a 29-yard reception. Isaiah Hunter had a 17-yard reception. Emmett Johnson had that 56-yard reception. I think all three of those big pass plays, the ball didn't go more than 10 yards through the air. So Dana Holgorsen really keyed up a game plan where they weren't going to ask TJ Lateef to throw a 20-yard dig or a big corner route or some long concept that would be difficult for a freshman quarterback. They drew up great schemes. They got him in play action, got him rolling and moving with his feet, and it really opened up some guys across the middle and just in crossing patterns for Nebraska. And then the ground game was just terrific with Emmett Johnson. Like, Dana Holgorsen kind of talked about, earlier in the season, like wanting to go to the number 2 and 3 backs and how Mosey had kind of emerged as maybe the next guy. And Mekhi Nelson was earning reps. And we've seen good runs from Quentin Ives at times. If Emmett Johnson is healthy and willing to run the way he's running, I almost think it hurts Nebraska to take him out of a game for one of those running backs that maybe are just a little bit cold. They're coming in, not getting the ball much. And but overall, I think fantastic play calling from Dana Holgorsen, great execution from TJ Lateef, and then Emmett Johnson was just a difference maker in this one. And a really overall pretty solid night from the O-line as well.
Yeah, absolutely. This being televised on Fox, the Fox crew even at halftime talked about Emmett Johnson maybe being the most underrated running back in college football. And I think the argument can be made, especially with a show out tonight. And as you said, 129 yards rushing, 103 yards receiving, 232 yards total in offense with 32 touches. So he went over, 1,000 yards, I think, last game. So now he's adding on to that with this game.
He eclipsed 1,000 yards last game. Just barely with a big performance against USC. And I believe after this week, I haven't looked at final stat totals. I believe he'll still be the leading running back in the Big Ten Conference. But yeah, I'm not subject to all of the former ex-players, Nebraska media, but the players that played for Nebraska now have a voice online. But I will say that Will Compton was very quick to say Emmett Johnson should be in the Heisman Trophy race. I think he has been a difference maker in some games. And if you look back to last offseason, Nebraska took a pretty big swing in terms of player investment with Dylan Raiola and Emmett Johnson. And there were some question marks. They let Dante Dowdell out the door to to Kentucky, another SEC school, for more money than Nebraska was going to pay Dante Dowdell, who was the 1-2 running back last year with Emmett. And it looks like Nebraska, swing and they made contact and they really hit a home run with Emmett Johnson. And Rule talked about it after tonight's game against UCLA. He's the type of player that he wants to be able to point to when there's a freshman that's struggling or there's a recruit wondering when they'll see the field, because Emmett Johnson's story is really interesting. He came in and was during that disheveled season with Scott Frost getting fired and sticks around and earns his keep in Rule's first season later in the year due to some injuries. He had his best game against Purdue at home, and I believe that was in late October or November. It was a cold one. And last year emerges, but just based off of how the offense went, he wasn't getting a lion's share of the carries at times. And now this year, he's the guy. So truly a Husker progression story, similar to how the team is building. He's continued to build and by far having his best season.
And we've got to talk about UCLA a little bit because it did seem like on the defensive side of the ball, Nebraska really didn't have an answer for Nico, their quarterback, running on the ground. He got away with a lot of slippery tackles, I think, busting through, and really kept them in the game, even with that fourth quarter drive where UCLA was starting from the 4, a 96-yard drive in which they just kept it alive, and that was the little life they showed to bring it within one score, but then it was a little too late, really, to see anything out of that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, too, is that, Nico played pretty well overall. He was pretty clean with the football. He got sacked twice, I believe. But overall, Nico, clean day with the football and had 86 yards on the ground. So, yeah, Matt Rule gave him kudos right away after that. He's a talented quarterback in this league and somebody that really, kept UCLA in this game, because their defense was struggling at times, but the way that the offense was able to go down the field and answer and score 14 unanswered in a matter of like 3 or 4 drives game time, it ended up being more like 30 or 40 minutes real time, but it was, third quarter, and then you go into the fourth quarter, you're down 2. They made it an interesting game. So, credit to UCLA. They came to fight, and they definitely didn't back down from the fight. But overall, I think just Nebraska executed their offense better, and were able to hold off UCLA long enough, because I think as the game progressed, UCLA started to, Nebraska's defense got banged up. Rex Guthrie went out briefly with an injury. Andrew Marshall looked banged up. So they were kind of getting deteriorated as the game went on. But then in the second half, you saw UCLA offense come out, and Nico's running it with his legs. They were throwing it to the running backs out of the backfield. Anthony Woods had a great play. So overall, UCLA was starting to catch on to Nebraska's defense as the game prolonged, but it was too little too late, really.
Right, and with this game, of course, we're getting toward the end of the season. Interesting to see Nebraska's response with the coaches as Dylan ends up with a season-ending injury in the USC game, broken fibula, and now TJ Lateef takes over. But Matt Rule said early in the week, really in press conferences, that he was going to call the game like he has a veteran quarterback, not really treat TJ Lateef any different. And really, TJ Lateef, to that, stepped up with a lot of poise, but I think they were also wanting to rally a lot of those guys around TJ Lateef so he didn't have more pressure to make this big game. Even though it ended up being a big game for him, a lot of guys were just in their assignments, blocking when they needed to, I think on the outside, some of the wide receivers, things like that, to get the big plays, really, that were coming down. I mean, there were 3 big plays, over 40 yards in this game. Emmett Johnson had 2 of them. The 56-yard one to the house in the second quarter, the 40-yard one to the house in the third quarter that kind of brought some momentum back for the Huskers. And then one of their running backs, Anthony Wood, had a 45-yard touchdown in the third quarter for UCLA. That was part of that, like you said, 14 unanswered for UCLA to come back.
Yeah, and I think, I think just talking about this team and a lot of the question marks after they lost to USC last week was motivation, because you're basically out of the playoff picture and you have 3 games left of the season. You're sitting there at 6-3. Some of these players, they're sitting pretty. There's a lot of finances involved. And obviously, a lot of players have a love for the game. They want to go out and play well on the gridiron. But the question of motivation kind of started to linger simply because it's like, well, you have 3 games left. What are you telling your team? It's like, well, we'd rather go to Tampa, Florida for a bowl game than Mobile, Alabama, right? Like, that's kind of what you're playing for. We could potentially play on January 1st or New Year's Day, right? So, that's kind of what the momentum shifted. But then the injury news comes out that Raiola's done for the year, and I think it kind of lit a fire under the team in terms of motivation. And it's not like they needed motivation. It's not like they didn't want to go win this week against UCLA. I think just the news of the Raiola injury really just said, we have to support TJ. He's now in this very difficult position as a true freshman quarterback, and I think it lit a fire under them, and they played like it tonight.
I'm just going to throw up the game summary here one more time, because as we've been talking, Nebraska improving to 7-3 on the season. They still have Penn State to come, and we haven't figured out a kickoff time, I don't think, for that just yet.
No.
But in between now and then, there's a bye week coming up, and I know the players are already talking about how that'll be useful for some recuperation between now and the last bye week they had. And then there will be Iowa on Black Friday. Kickoff will be at 11 a.m. on CBS. And a couple interesting games with Penn State and Iowa today. I don't know if you kept up with those today, Chase. Penn State only lost to Indiana by a field goal.
Both those games, Iowa and Penn State could have won.
Right.
Yeah, Indiana had an incredible catch in the end zone, and they probably lose that game. And then Oregon had a good game plan down the stretch. They kick a field goal with 3 seconds left in an ugly game in a hard-hitting stadium to win at. So, but by no means are Penn State and Iowa going to be easy games for Nebraska. But they get a week off, and I think they have a newfound motivation after this week. And if the offense looks like that, and the defense can, play sound. I wouldn't say the defensive performance was incredible. It actually kind of got worse a little bit as the game went on, but overall, the offense was really complete, especially with a freshman quarterback. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, and they weren't trying too much, but it was just safe and smart football. And, routine plays led to some big plays. So it'll be an exciting 3 weeks here as the season kind of comes to a close, the regular season.
It just felt, for some reason, that Nebraska was firing on more cylinders today throughout this game, at least on offense, and then enough defense to kind of back up the offensive play. But as we wrap up talk about Nebraska football, there were a lot of other Huskers in action today, so we're going to talk a little bit about volleyball, men's basketball, and then women's basketball, and then we'll let you go because it's been a late night for a lot of Husker fans, even though we've been hearing on social media that Lincoln hasn't gone to bed quite yet. They were shooting off fireworks tonight in some of the coldest temperatures of the season. Well,
every Husker team won today, pretty much. So football won, women's basketball won, men's basketball won, and the volleyball team won. 24-0.
15th sweep of the season for volleyball, 25-15 in the first set, 25-21, second set, 25-20 in the third set. Their next games will come next week at UCLA on Friday.
Yeah, the LA trips didn't match up. But, the volleyball team continues to roll. Taylor Landfair had a nice day in a return to her old school, Minnesota, where she transferred from. And Andy Jackson was dominant in the middle. So, not too many words about the volleyball team because they, in a blink of an eye, actually, at the state volleyball matches all day at the Devaney Center, the team showed up. Because of how fast their Minnesota match was, they showed up during the Class B state title match to the Devaney Center. And actually were there. I don't know if all of them stayed, but Macy Bosiger's younger sister, Mallory Bosiger, setter for Norris, Husker commit. So the team joined the student section for at least one set. And Norris back-to-back state champs. So, Nebraska volleyball continue to roll. Really impressive performance, but it just seems like nothing can slow them down right now.
You mentioned the Bosingers. There was another interesting headline that came out of state volleyball, too, with Danny Busboom, Kelly's alma mater, right?
Freeman won their 4th state title in school history. That is DBK's alma mater, and I believe it was the first state title since 2014 for the Falcons, so congrats to them.
Awesome. Well, that should do it for our End Report Husker Show this evening. We just followed that Nebraska holding off a late push from UCLA, 28-21. And the End Report is, of course, your home for the Husker highlights and headlines. We will see you next time.
You've been listening to the End Report Husker Show, sponsored by Fat Dog's Convenience Store. Watch, listen, and stream on the 1011 Now app, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more Husker coverage throughout the week, watch The End Report on 1011 Sports at 6 and 10 p.m. and download the 1011 Now app.